Well, welcome back to Tram Crazy. This is the second video in the Basic Python series, and in this video I will be showing you how to get set up for coding in Python on Windows and Ubuntu. First, I should tell you what we'll be using to code. As you know, Python is the language this series will cover. If you don't know why I chose that, then have a look at part 1 of this series, which I'll link down below. However, we need a couple of other things to get coding. To write our code, we will be using Visual Studio Code, which is my favourite code editor. It's also not too hard for beginners to get started with. I will be showing you how to set yourself up on Windows and Ubuntu, but not macOS. This is because I don't have a Mac to record with. However, there are some great alternative guides to setting up programming software on macOS. You'll be able to follow along on a Mac once you're set up though. Let's have a look at how to set yourself up on Windows. I'll see you on my Windows desktop. Right, so here I am on my Windows desktop. This PC has not got any coding languages installed. In fact, it actually belongs to Ransley Suboptimal, who's a loyal fan of the channel. This is just a demonstration virtual machine. It doesn't actually belong to Ransley Suboptimal. He's just my character. Ransley Suboptimal. So, he seems to have some interesting documents on his desktop, like Tram Crazy fan page plans, Tram Crazy fan page logo, and my thoughts about Tram Crazy, and I love Tram Crazy. Well, anyway, aside from Ransley's slightly unusual desktop content, first of all we need to install Python, and then we'll install our favourite coding editor. So, to install Python on Windows, we're going to go to python.org. Close the Microsoft Edge thing. And now here we are on python.org. We're going to go to Downloads and then download Python 3.10.2 for Windows. And now we just need to wait a few seconds and it will download. And there we are, it's now downloaded. Nearly. There we go. So if we click Open File, it will say we can click Install Now, and it will install Ransley Suboptimal's Python. Now I would recommend adding it to Path to make it easy to run later on, so just tick this box here, and then you can press Install Now. Say yes to the allow this app to make changes, and then just wait for it to load. Python is quite quick to install. This virtual machine has got 4 cores and 8 gigabytes, which is a fairly typical basic computer specification, so this should be fairly representative of install speeds on your computer. It's now installing pip, which is the Python package manager, which will let us install other Python libraries. And now we're finished. So Python for Windows has now installed. So at this point, you could stop here, because in our start menu, if we look here, we've got idle and Python 3.10. If we scroll down to the Python section, we have idle. Now idle is actually quite interesting because it's Python's default editor. Now idle is alright, but I wouldn't recommend it for serious coding. It hasn't got many features. So we're going to use Python as listed here. This is the command prompt version, but we're going to link that to another coding editor. So my favourite coding editor is Visual Studio Code. So we're going to install that now. So a quick Google for Visual Studio Code will find the website code.visualstudio.com. Now Visual Studio Code is free and almost open source. It's made by Microsoft. So if we press download for Windows stable build, that will now start downloading Visual Studio Code. It shouldn't take long either. Okay, now we have almost finished installing Visual Studio Code onto our PC. Well, no, not installing, downloading. Now we can install Visual Studio Code. So again, click Open File. And then we'll see the Visual Studio Code setup screen. So we can click I accept the agreement. I would recommend reading this agreement first, but I've already read it. And press Next. And then we're happy with this default folder in our app data. So we'll press Next. And yep, I'm happy with it being Visual Studio Code on the Start menu, so I'll press Next. And you know what, I would like a desktop icon, you don't have to do this. And we'll add this and this to make it easier to use. So I'll press Next and install. So it's now installing Visual Studio Code to our directory. Okay, it's now finished. We can now delete the installer if we want to, but I assume you can do that yourself. So we'll close Edge, and now we have our brand new Visual Studio Code window. So from here we can start going through the setup menu. So I think I will choose Dark Plus for my theme, but we don't really need to do much of that setup at the moment. But to make it work with Python well, we are going to go to the extensions option, and we will see Python right at the top of this list because it's one of the most popular extensions. So if we click on this, we can press install, and it will install all the features we need to use Visual Studio Code easily with Python. Okay, we now have installed Python. Well, the Python extension. So we can select our Python interpreter and pick Python 3.10.2 64-bit. So that's now working. Right, now we're going to test that Python is working in Visual Studio Code. So we're going to open a folder. I think I will go into my documents and make a new folder called Python. And if we go in this Python folder, then we can use that for all our Python coding. Yes, we trust the authors because we only just made it. And now, within this folder, we can create a new file. And I think we'll call it it will be a text file. And then we can press select a language and type Python. And now we have a Python file. So just to test that everything is working, don't worry if you don't understand this, but we're going to run print hello and then save the file as test.py, and then we're going to try running it with the play button. Okay, so it said hello. So that works. So our Python and Visual Studio Code installation is all finished, and this will be ready for next time you want to do coding in the next episode. Let's move on to Ubuntu. We'll just hop into our Ubuntu desktop. Okay, so here I am on the Ransley suboptimal Ubuntu VM. In Ubuntu, Python is already installed for us, which is really useful, and that's because it's a Linux distribution. So just to check this is working as it should be, we can go to our apps down here and look for the terminal, and it's here. So if we open this up, we can type Python 3 and press enter, and we should get a Python prompt. So that's all installed. So then from there we can just close this. Yeah, don't worry about that. Okay, so all we need to do is install Visual Studio Code, which is my favourite coding editor. And to do that, we can go to the Ubuntu software store on the left. Just wait for that to load for a minute. Okay, so if we go into the development section, then here we can look through so many coding editors, but my favourite one is Visual Studio Code, which is here. So if we click on Code, it says Code Editing Redefined. It's got a 5-star rating. And okay, that looks fine. So we can just press Install. And authentication is required, so I'll enter Ransley's password. And then it will install Visual Studio Code automatically for us. Okay, so Visual Studio Code has been installed on our Ubuntu virtual machine. So we can close the Ubuntu software store, pop into our apps again, and we should see one called Visual Studio Code right at the bottom there. So if we click that, we can open it up for the first time. Okay, and here we have Visual Studio Code, exactly the same as what we had in Windows. So again, we're going to go to the extensions store. We can close the Get Started tab and install the Python extension. This shouldn't take too long to install. Okay, so the Python extension has installed. So, we can press Open Terminal and then use Python 3 -- version to check that it's there. So yeah, Python 3.8.10 works. So now we can try creating a Python file. So here, select the language as Python, and we can do our first test. So let's do print hello. Okay, we need to save this, so I'll put it in Ransley's documents and make a new folder called Python. I'm going to save it as test1. And now we can try running it with this play button. Okay, so it's printed hello. So that's all working, and now you'll be ready to complete the rest of the tutorials in your Ubuntu environment. This video was the second part in an 11-part series. We've got 9 to go. In the next video, you'll get started with some proper coding. I'll see you then. For now, like and subscribe, and thanks for watching. Bye!